and wondered if there's any questions. In 2005 or 8 or 12?
So you invited various people to come into the dances, you say. Tell me about the agenda of that first meeting and how you got the dialogue really rolling around something concrete.
I think the experience in Bancroft really set the scene for talking, because we had a concrete example of how well it worked, and it was really bringing in, okay, community care, how would you see it working with us? I have pulled out notes from old files as I try and clean up my office, and looking at some of those notes, it was really, I would say, excited conversation about the possibilities. And yeah, we couldn't stop talking about the possibilities, and then it was like more boring to talk about, well, how are we actually going to do this?
Well, and I think one of the bigger pieces too is just the fact that our boards in particular were very, very involved in the whole project and sat at all the committee meetings, and because they believed in what we were doing or wanted to do. I mean, that was really helpful, and that's sort of where the true governance piece comes in that, you know, everybody's been speaking about tonight, is from that level. Because without their support, the project wouldn't have gone forward. And we did hit a speed bump at one point where it was strictly kind of at the governance level.
While the microphone's coming, I should also say another thank you to the Lynn, because they contributed $100,000 towards this project. So between the Parrot and the Lynn funding and some other grants that we got, we were well positioned to say we can really do this. Mm-hmm. Nancy.
Great, ladies, great. A couple of questions. First of all, so I'm assuming you don't own the space. So you lease it? And in that lease, is the electricity and all the utilities are included?
Oh, someone had to talk about costs.
I knew that. Oh, darn. I've got more questions around costs, too.
This has not been a money saver, and it never was from the beginning. It was always certainly with the rising tide of dementia that we're always talking about at the Alzheimer's Society. How can we position ourselves to serve more people better? So we talk about depth of different organizations. So Providence Care stepped forward and said, we will sign the lease for all 17,517 square feet. And you talk about trust. And we will have memorandum of understanding and subleases, and we've got it all divided up as to what percentage is your office space versus what percentage do you take of the shared space, and that took about 2 or 3 months of back and forth. As I did have money, I think, at the top of the list of speed bumps, so there was a fair amount of back and forth and who could afford it. We had the, I think I've mentioned him on the back, is Bernie Willette from Rentex, who's a local businessman who's quite a philanthropist, and he basically went up to the Bayview Mall management and said, are you crazy? These guys are going to be here, they're not going to be fly-by-nights. Come up with a rent that's reasonable, that they can afford, and then you will have 17,000 square feet leased that will be there, and they will pay their bills. So without his help, I mean, Bayview Mall started up about here, and we ended up down here. So
for instance, like the telephone system, do you have your own telephone system, or you have one telephone system?
Well, that's a good, we just had the emails on that this week. So what Providence Care does is they have this memorandum of understanding that says, you know, you're 24% and you're this percent. So pretty much everything comes down to that. So they pay the hydro bill, and then they shoot out an invoice based on that percentage split. The gas bill comes in. We're just working out the telephones. You know, what is the monthly cost? How many handsets does everybody have? What's the long distance? And we're just working our way through the telephone stuff now.
Thank you.
Maybe this is a good place to speak about some of the things that we do share that don't cost so much money. It's things like the shared reception, and the actual receptionist is shared 50% between Laura and my agency, and things like the administrative assistant is shared between the two of the agencies. We do their finances, for example, so my office manager, you know, does that piece as well. So there's, you know, a lot of the things that aren't so much dollar related, but yeah, it's expensive, but when you look at the accessibility and the potentials, it's you know, the only way to go, really.
Am I on now? Yes, okay. So I'm hoping that Picton will be Crossroads 3.0, yeah? But my question is really, what around governance, what were the pieces that pushed the edges for your boards? Like, what were the sticking points where they felt like this was a real reach for them to do this? Was it around the
Money.
risk or money?
Money.
I really didn't encounter too many issues with my board. I think they all just truly believed in, you know, where we should be going and what the vision was, and I'm a really good salesman.
I think when the first numbers came out and the Bayview Mall was saying, this is what we think you should pay in rent, that when I say, you know, the board's going, you know, sorry, we don't have we can't do that. So, and that's, you know, financial responsibility is at the board level, so if it was going to cost way too much, they had to back off.
I'm just curious if any other LINs has approached you about fostering your idea.
Not directly, no.
It's from my perspective, it's a fantastic idea, and I know from federal experience that you can take a program and you can foster it and you can disseminate it out to other regions.
I do brag about this every time I go to a provincial Alzheimer's Society function, which is this weekend, and they have asked for pictures and, you know, what's happening. And just a couple of weeks ago, Alzheimer's Society of York region was announcing a move, and they were obviously in with someone else. So I'd be quite curious to meet that executive director and get some details on what theirs looks like.
Sorry, one more question just occurred to me. So now that you're all living and breathing under one roof, you've kind of done the integration thing from the bottom up. Do you see any other opportunities for even closer integration, one board perhaps?
Well, probably the only, you know, brainstorming potential would be Shelley's group and mine, in that they are autonomous boards on their own. Providence Care is not going to be interested in taking us on, I'm sure, and nor VON Canada, whose board is right at the national level. You know, from the Alzheimer's Society world, Leanne's here as a board member from Prince Edward County for the Alzheimer's Society, and we've started our meetings on, I guess that would be a horizontal integration of the two societies. But within our group, probably not. We're part of a, you know, larger provincial organization, so there's all that branding to do with the Alzheimer's Society. So if we wanted to, you know, really get married, that wouldn't work well for our marketing side of things of what we do. Oh, there's one over here first to the left.
So does that mean you're living in sin? Is that what you're...
Yes, Reverend Ed.
It's okay. I'm retired. I don't care anymore. So, can you say a little more about the role of the boards, particularly in the initial part of that? Because what I've been hearing is that that's fantastic, but you had the support of your boards, but it was really staff-driven. And so where were the boards around their own strategic planning? And so I can understand that the choking around the cost issues, but just how were the boards engaged at the very beginning?
I'd like Paul to come up and speak about this because he's the board member that came to the meetings.
And now he's probably going to fire me.
I asked him, you didn't.
Oh, that's right.
She asked.
You can't fire me.
Thank you. From the beginning, the boards did not know each other. One of the exercises was having the same reference they talked about in terms of having trust. So you get to know members of the other boards, you talk about issues, you say, I agree with you on that. I like the way you think about these items. I like the way you look at this particular exercise. And when they come up with this massive, as you put it, dollar figure up here, we were totally in agreement. The answer is no. Therefore, somebody's got to do something. And then Bernie Willette's name got raised, and he was kind enough to help us. And his combination of, I think it's called cement bags in his trunk and knee-breaking devices helped the Bayview Mall to change their mind a little bit, if I understood correctly. But the governance side was one of saying, let's talk about what we're dealing with. Let's sit at the meetings they're having. Don't let them do it by themselves. Let's sit there so if they need input, we can give it to them. It was very important that they're using the term engaged and all these kinds of things. I think it's a matter of saying we were willing to look at this from the point of view of, does this make practical sense for the organizations? And the answer is yes. In hindsight, could we have done things a little differently? Maybe have done things a little, not so much better, but a little bit more appropriately, if I can use that term. And we learned. Some things we didn't do things as well as we could have. And a classic example is, what did you finally do with all the keys? The 12 billion keys we ended up with. I need 4 for this and 6 for that. He said, what do you do with all these keys?
We made a mistake.
I know we did. Hold it. That's why I said there are things we learned that, guess what? One of those things you don't appreciate until you start into such things as having somebody pull a fire alarm and realizing you can't open a door. Because I don't have that key, they do. Oh, good. So we learned. We learned a couple of those unfortunate lessons. Most of them, however, were not expensive, relatively speaking. In hindsight, for example, the Parrot Room as it is, given I spent part of my life in the training world, I looked back at it and said, I should have been more forceful to get the roof higher. For those of us who like to train, you want a roof at least this high. And it's not that high. That's the problem. When you're in a room that size, it feels small. So you say, it's a mistake. It's not the end of the world, but it's one of those things you learn by saying, do we understand that all the way through? The answer is no. For example, our staff's rooms are not very big, but they appear big. Why? The ceilings are tall. So you walk in, you get a sense of openness. It's amazing how that concept is very good, but that's thank goodness to the designers, the people who helped us build things. Anyway, back to your point that was asked, how do we get along? At first, not well. We had that same lack of trust. Who is this person talking on behalf of? Let's use somebody from that big town down the road called Kingston. For those of us from small towns like Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto, that's just the big town down the road. And it's one of those things you say, what they're saying makes sense. They want to bring in some expertise. Let's listen to it. So we would listen to the Robs or what's his name? Drawing a blank. Stacy. And he thinks things through well. He presents well. Let's give him a little rope, if I can use that terrible term, and see how he comes out. And it all worked out very well. And we learned from each other that you can trust each other. It's amazing how that works. Any questions on that particular thing? Anything further? I'm not trying to be vague. I'm just trying to say there's those issues that surfaced, some of which were specific, and some were a matter of saying we want to do things differently. Microphone, if we have one, or here she comes.
My question is not necessarily further to your explanation about boards. I'm Dorothy Flindle, by the way. My question was going to be a question of, to follow up on yours, are you going to, along with the success story, make available to other people some of these things that were the catches? We learned we should have done this, because I think that would be just as helpful to people planning to move forward on something like this, helping us avoid that. Shelley's
going to do that in her spare time.
Right.
I'll look for it in one of your columns or something, Shelley. That'll be a help. I also wondered if, as you were planning this, you were able to have any conversations with the other group in Belleville that has come together to share accommodation, the group of agencies that work out at the Mary Street School, the old St. Mary School, because they've had a lot of, work and problems in getting together there.
Go.
They were one of the first people we talked to just doing research on how's it going. We went out and looked at St. Mary's School. Would that be a place that we could move in? And some of them came to our community engagement to give some input on that. So, yeah, we were in contact with them. Oh, you went, yeah?
Brockville's the other one. exactly.
Shelley went to Brockville. There's Providence Care was involved in, they call it Front Ave, from Front Avenue, and saw how it was working down there. So Alex, who was on the committee from Providence Care, had lived through that experience, so she brought a lot of let's not do that ideas to the table.
I like the suggestion of the various kind of operational practicalities. Like, what does it take to operationalize this? But it seems to me that where you started from is a place that sometimes we have trouble getting to, which is a real awareness of shared mission and a vision of what that might look like. In other words, how tackling that mission sort of jointly could improve what was being provided to your
Well, I think that
client base. I mean, if that...
really the small Bancroft experience was really a beacon that we would keep returning to, that look how well families are being supported there. We want to do the same thing here. Yes, Shelley was just freshly new, so she wasn't, and not from Belleville, so she had no Belleville silos to deal with. She was just listening to ideas.
To take it a step further, as we continue to profess, our target is that person out there, be it, call it a client, a patient, whatever they're called. That's our target. Does that same person cross into various other areas across the community? The answer is yes. Are there some, and this is these two, and obviously those of us at the board, realizing that there's a crossover? Why wouldn't we do that together? So it's that vision that started it, on top of which, like it or not, we didn't like our premises anyways. You can't park, you have the difficulty getting there, we have to move somewhere. So where are we going to go? And the Bayview Mall is very workable from the point of view of public access, relative parking, except for the people who drive into various people's cars and things that happen around the place. It's happened a few times. Police officer the other day trying to figure out where the guy was parked through anyways, that's another story. So there's this common vision of saying, how do we help that person to be, in our case, remain in their home as long as possible with the support we can give them as best we can? And can we do that together? And by the way, the example you used of having this couple come in and need combination of exercise, it's amazing that works. And that was the vision from the beginning. How do we make that happen across agencies, providing we have the right agencies? We think we do. Do we have all of them? We ask more. Those are the four that came together.
My name is Sandy Sidsworth. Laura, you came to us when we were still at Century Place as Canadian Mental Health, and you asked us to join with you. And I thought about that, and then Queen Mary asked us to come over there. And it was a better fit because our clients and our transitional homes are on that side, and we deal with such a strong poverty base for those that we serve. But your ideas, the collaboration, we have kind of stolen, and our committee has taken on board that to come together as a collective using your ideas to access, we're getting ready to put forward a proposal for elevator and things like that. And it's come directly from watching what's happened with you folks, learning from your mistakes and making some of our own. And I think what comes down to the heart of it is understanding who you're serving and where do you serve them best. So, sorry.
in that list of speed bumps, I think the money was the first one and trust was the second one. And Paul's remark about too many keys, and your little handout doesn't show all the doors that are in the place. But I was the one that made the key mistake there, and part of it was this, well, we've moved in together, but I'm not giving you a key to my office mentality. And it only took, well, that fire alarm was the, real doozer.
Exactly.
You know, we can't open this door because the person with the key, so we just, it's complete, I have 2 keys now. I have one to get in from the outside, and I have one for, and then Shelley and I said, fine, we're in the same area anyway, 1 key, everybody's office. You know, you got filing cabinets if you really want to keep stuff from other people. That was a real interesting trust. We've moved from here over to here now.
So I'd like to thank you folks for really putting together a great presentation. So,